Right, onwards and upwards. There's no way we're gonna make it to the end of the dungeon in this clip, but hey, we can certainly make some more progress on the way there and get a bit stronger while doing so. And we've got more shinobi to deal with, because for some reason we're treating ninjas of varying kinds as more dangerous than a lot of the dragons in this game. Though thankfully, we've gotten strong enough that dragons and ninjas are both pretty easy to kill right now, even if they can cause a lot of damage in return. Which, I'm sure it means it won't be long before we start running into something else that's gonna turn out to be pretty damn deadly for us to deal with. There's no way that things won't get rougher for us the higher we go, after all. Especially with how infamous the final dungeon of this game is. Son of a bitch! Carmine didn't even get to do anything there. He was literally taken down with a single goddamn glance. Hell, he wasn't even hit with anything that would have let his armor have some kind of impact. At least Brett got hit several times before he was knocked out. Though the fact that both of our hardest hitting melee fighters were taken out by these cloaked bastards just is not making me feel good. Yeah, definitely not doing our supplies any favors there. I'm not feeling nervous enough to want to retreat after that, but still, that definitely didn't do my confidence any favors. Guess we've returned to a previous floor, for lack of a better way to put it. Kind of feels like a lot of unused space in here, but then it's not like I've got any idea what this tower generally does other than stand around, waiting for a heroic bunch of adventurers to get through the rather annoying magically defensive statues to invade the place. Hell, considering the number of Final Fantasy spin-off games have the various new universes mingling with one another somehow or another, maybe this floor of this dungeon is part of a ballroom or something. I know, probably not a great idea to get into the rabbit hole of thinking about how the games interconnect with one another. The franchise honestly was not built for that sort of thing. So any game that tries to pull any kind of crossover within the series, or is itself an entire crossover of several different entries in the series, is kind of narratively crippled. You can still have fun with them, but dear God, Dissidia is pretty annoying for me to try to get into for several reasons, and World of Final Fantasy feels like a prototype to Honkai Star Rail, at least when it comes to the storytelling. World of Final Fantasy was made long before gacha games were even invented. It was a lot more of an innocent time, and I honestly would prefer to play through games like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail if it was easier to just choose to restart the game and experience the story all over again without giving a damn about who you're drawing and when. Even when it's a simple story. Hell, this game is a pretty painfully simple story. Final Fantasy I was even more simple as you could possibly get. And frankly, my biggest issue with the Pokemon games isn't actually the simple story in many of the entries. It's a combination of me feeling absolutely disgusted with how Nintendo has done the whole Pal World thing, and the frustration that various series that have tried to innovate and grow have nowhere near the level of cultural impact as Pokemon does when they feel like they're either not trying, or the company isn't giving the people working on the games enough staff or time to fully create and polish what they'd like. Seriously, I had a conversation with my older brother, and he apparently had no clue what Final Fantasy was at all. He's been getting annoyed by how many games these days have gambling bullshit thrown into them, and wanted some suggestions from me on some various games to try out. He's enjoyed a number of Western-made role-player games, so I suggested he look into the Pixel remaster of Final Fantasy to see if he'd potentially be up for Japanese-made role-player games. My main words of advice was that he could start with Final Fantasy 1, 4, or 5. Should absolutely skip over 2 and 3 unless he's curious about the evolution of the series. And while he should go through Final Fantasy VI at some point, he should not do that first. Doing Final Fantasy VI first might make him feel all games should have that quality of writing to them, which would make even some of the damn good ones like 7 and 10 potentially disappointing to him somehow. And would also make it a bit tougher for him to shift over to other various series within that subgenre. I honestly don't know if that would be the case for him. His previous RPGs were things like Diablo and Baldur's Gate. For all I know, Japanese role-player games are just not his scene at all. I just found it absolutely insane, as we were talking, that he had never heard of any Japanese role-player games other than Pokemon. And even then, he did not have much respect for it. Yeah, definitely not going to be able to keep going up for much longer with our high potions looking that depleted at this point. Huh. Well, that looks like a bit more of a complicated maze for us to have to walk through. And yet another former boss that's just a little recolored. Though I suppose the gold with some green highlights is better than the mostly green from the first time we saw this guy. Part of me can't help feeling a small bit disappointed that there isn't some kind of stars or other background instead of black between the little thin walkways there. Well, that attack did surprisingly little considering some of the other Quim have managed to do to us, and good God, saying that monster's name aloud just makes them lose whatever minutes their appearance might have given them. Should I even bother looking up where the name Glacia Laborlas came from? It's another random encounter, not anything important. And hey, they made something called Thanatos painfully forgettable around here. Not really that major, but it really just makes the idea of checking the names feel like a bit of a wasted effort on my part. When we're 32 clips in, I feel like I'm pretty worn down with this game, even if I'm still willing to see it through to the end. Yeah. This amount of attrition is just way too much for us to have possibly dealt with in one smooth dive through the dungeon. Hell, we're nearly level 50 and it's still feeling like an absolute beatdown just dealing with the various random encounters. Sure, we're able to easily rip through the encounters at the bottom of the tower now, but we have been getting stronger, but this is still pretty damn rough. Okay, we've got 2 more chests on this floor. Probably a good idea to start heading back once we grab both of those chests. And now we're dealing with Thor, who is just a recolor of monsters we've fought a good amount of times. In a game where the series introduced a recurring summoned monster that goes by the name of Odin, who looks like an armored guy on a horse. I know, this game isn't going to care all that much about mythology, and this isn't the kind of series that's going to ever try to do anything with it either. Still, that kind of gets on my nerves. less than 10 eye potions left. Definitely a good sign that we've gone too deep for too long. I suppose that's what the button to stop random encounters is for in the Pixel Remaster, but good god, I feel guilty whenever I use that button in any of the Final Fantasy games, especially since none of them had that sort of thing in the original release. Anyway, it certainly took us a while to see the redo of the other mage's boss. Well, I kind of wish I knew if the random encounter version had more durability than the actual boss there. Granted, we fought the boss quite a while ago, but technically speaking, that was in a back-to-back pair of boss fights, and that was several clips ago. Really feels a bit funny to see a random encounter just shrug off over 4,000 damage in a single strike. Sure, he didn't last long, but I can't help feeling that that many thousands of health should only be on something like a boss. Right. Another patch of monsters that are assuming the name of the god Thunder. And they didn't even have the common courtesy to hold a hammer. In a series where we've had the occasional moment of seeing someone holding a hammer that's literally called Thor's hammer. And, of course, I don't think the Japanese design team wanted to bother trying to figure out how to write down the name Mjolnir in katakana. Hell, I don't know off the top of my head how to spell the name, and I've seen it plenty of times in Marvel Comics and Halo novels. I know it starts with an M, there's a J in there that's silent for some weird reason, an L, an I, and an R, but I'm pretty sure there are other letters in there somewhere. It's that awkward kind of thing where if I see it, I immediately know what word it is and how to pronounce it, but if I'm supposed to write it without looking up the exact spelling online, then I'm pretty screwed. But then I suppose it's not the kind of word that you throw around in your average day-to-day conversations. Well, what a novelty, using healing magic from our healing mage as we're getting the hell out of here. It's funny how I'm generally pretty liberal with healing magic when I'm going through something with the sort of MP system that Final Fantasy has from Game 4 onwards. But if it's got a charge system like Final Fantasy 1 through 3, I save the healing magic for boss fights. Well, the Black Pants Dijin certainly didn't seem to do all that much against us at this point, though. I'm also kind of surprised how much health the simplest healing spell does when we do it from the menu. I've got the distinct feeling it wouldn't be quite so effective if we were actually using it during a fight. Yeah, we're just gaining experience points by the bucket load now. I kinda wish I knew just how much more we probably should level up before finally making it to the final villain. Of course, I also can't help wishing that the game actually did something more with the guy who's supposed to be our primary antagonist for this bare-bones story. Again, Garland from Final Fantasy I had more of a presence in the original game than Xande in this game, and it's not like that game did anything to build up the idea of Garland being the main villain at the end of it all. The game just did the somewhat interesting thing of having the absolute first boss of the game turning out to be absolute last monster of the game there. I mean, sure, technically speaking, Golbez in Final Fantasy IV is done better than even that, with the way he's a constantly referenced presence in the game, until the point when it turned out that a higher power was actually in charge of the whole insanity in the world. But it's tough enough for me to really feel all that much about Golbez as a villain. considering how the game seems to unintentionally undermine his authority and gravitas so much. I know he's the first villain in the series who tried to do anything so extensive with, but at least the first one I have any experience with, since I can't seem to push myself all that far into Final Fantasy II, and they might have something, but yeah. I guess it's just no surprise that Golbez would feel underwhelming compared to villains who will come after his game. And you've got to respect that he paved the way for things later on. Really wish I could have felt some measure of menace from that floating, disembodied head. But even then, the monsters that are doing a good amount of damage to us don't make me feel all that much at this point of the game. Well, part of me is tempted to end the clip as soon as I save to make things simpler for me to edit the next clip. The other is looking at how long the next bit of raw footage is, and I'm gonna have to do some fast forwarding at the start of that anyway. So I may as well put the part where I'm gonna fast forward as we return to the floor where I pulled back from into this clip to potentially make sure I don't have to do any especially awkward cuts in the next clip. Definitely prefer when I can just get rid of any bit of raw footage once I'm done with a clip. Really helps me get the sense that I'm making progress in an LP and getting closer to reaching the ending when I see it's taken up fewer gigs on my drive. Midori managing to kill something with a physical blow is one thing. Midori managing to do over 1,000 in damage in a single blow is rather disconcerting. He wasn't hitting that hard back when he was a red mage, when being a physical fighter was half of his damn gimmick. And again, I can't help finding it more than a little annoying that the black and white mages were pretty viable for a massive chunk of the game, arguably even up to the ending, while the red mage lost relevancy somewhere around the midpoint. There's probably a lot more we could be selling in our inventory here. Hell, there are plenty of swords there that are absolutely no chance in hell we're ever gonna bother equipping on anyone this far into the game. Anyway, time to start climbing our way back up the tower. Good God, this place is annoyingly large. Well, there goes our first few eye potions on this climb. We've got more than enough to make it to where we absolutely need to go, though. It's hard to tell just how many we'll have when we get to the place where we fell back last time, or if we'll even make it to the final boss in the next clip. It's not like I'm gonna check the footage because I haven't gotten to it just yet. That might fuck with my reactions later. Again, it just feels weird how Thanatos can be taken down pretty damn easily here. I know she was capable of taking a hit when we first entered this dungeon a few clips ago. It's definitely a good sign that we're getting stronger the longer we try to climb this place, though some of that has to do with the fact that we gained some damn good weapons while working our way through. And I don't think I'll ever stop finding it amusing that the dungeon somehow feels more relaxing to deal with than several of the ones leading up to it, just because we don't have to deal with any especially frustrating gimmicks while in it. At the very least, Final Fantasy IV certainly managed to piss me off with the sheer amount of counterattacks we ran into in the final dungeon. Granted, that was an annoyance that was a thing since pretty early in that game, and something I'm sure we were supposed to have gotten used to by then, but I definitely could have done without it. Definitely says something that over 1200 in damage is still considered one of the weaker blows around here. Of course, it's also tough to even predict when Midori is going to get an especially solid hit like that. He's just as likely to land blows that do around 200 or even get hit so pathetic they stay in the double digits. At the very least, when you're taking down enemies at this kind of rate, it's easy to fall into the mental trap of feeling like nothing could possibly stand in your way. Which, of course, will make whatever boss you run into a potentially nasty surprise. Sure, the boss probably isn't going to do anywhere near the amount of damage as an obscene number of random encounters just to reach him, but still. Okay, not even sure why I'm assigning summons to Brett at this moment. Even if I changed his class mid-climb, he wouldn't be able to use any of them. When you go from a non-magical class to a magical one, you don't gain any magical charges. You have to either spend some items to gain magical power or find a place to rest. Part of me feels it might have been better if you could get magical charges regardless of if you're in a magical class or not. So, if you feel the need to change partway through a dungeon, it doesn't feel like you're essentially punished for it. Sure, that could be abused, but I can't help feeling that there's not really enough that the player can do to abuse the various classes in this game, with the way the enemies and classes were thought up, though maybe that's a fault of my imagination or my knowledge of the underlying mechanics. I suppose the 3D remake of this game might have done something to improve that matter, but still, it really feels like one of the unintentional weaknesses of Final Fantasy III. Seriously, you're given a lot of freedom for classes, but the enemy design and how the game handles you switching between physical and magical classes does not encourage you to have all that much freedom or creativity with it. Even with the Pixel Remaster doing everything it can to smooth things out, there's only so much it can do when one of the problems is such a fundamental issue in how the entire game was put together. Well, that tracking could certainly take a beating. Wonder why it took us so long to run into one of those. Well, there's no good way to really wind things down in this clip, considering how the divide is going to happen. Just that we've got an annoying amount of footage left to deal with after we've gone this far. Well, it can't go on forever.